Oceanic whitetip sharks are one of the most dangerous shark species for humans. Their tendency to hunt in packs, combined with their curiosity and fearlessness towards humans, makes encountering one of these animals in the water a deadly one. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In today's episode, we take a look at 3 of the most terrifying oceanic whitetip shark attacks ever. Welcome to Final Affliction.
Sharm el-Sheikh is a city found on the tip of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt and is a popular destination for tourists due to its sandy beaches and luxurious resorts. With a rich and diverse marine habitat, many people come just for the swimming, as they can watch the fish swim amongst the colorful coral reefs. What most people don't know about this resort city is that it was terrorized by sharks in 2010. This spate of attacks began with 2 women, 48-year-old Olga Martchenko and 70-year-old Lyudmila Stolyarova, both on holiday from Russia. Although at the time they only had their nationality in common and didn't know each other, they would end the day in the same helicopter, being airlifted to an intensive care hospital to treat the injuries that they inflicted within minutes of each other. First, let's take a look at Olga Martchenko and the events just before her attack. She had taken a holiday to Egypt with her daughter Yelena in November 2010 and had been enjoying showing her the culture of the new country, as well as taking advantage of the beautiful coastal scenery that was on offer to them. They both loved swimming together, and so most of the holiday had been taken up in the crystal waters of the Red Sea. On the day of the attack, the mother and daughter had decided to have one last swim before choosing somewhere to eat, but they would never make it to their lunch date. Olga was floating on her back, staring up at the clear sky above her and feeling the warm water on her skin. It felt like paradise. Her left arm was stretched out wide, and after some time floating, it grazed against something rough like sandpaper. At first, she suspected it was a rock, but it felt too leathery to be a rock. So she tried to figure out exactly what she was touching. Maybe it was a dolphin. She didn't have to wonder for long, as she felt a shark dig its jagged teeth into her arm and shake her. Pain ripped through her arm, and when she tore away from the jaws of the massive animal, she quickly saw that it had ripped her arm clean off. Terrified and covered in her own blood, she began to scream for help, frantically searching for her daughter and praying the shark wasn't about to bite her now too. Luckily, Yelena was safe on the jetty and had seen the ordeal, watching her mother sink beneath the waves and then arise in a panic, red with blood. As Olga tried to swim back to the jetty, the shark continued to follow her, biting her again and again. Each bite forced her back under the water, and the whole beach could hear her screams as she resurfaced. Luckily for her, Olga was wearing swim fins at the time, which helped to propel her to the jetty and into the open arms of the lifeguards, who quickly pulled her from the water. Onlookers watched as the shark continued to circle, just as Olga had been dragged from the water. It was now a race against time to keep her alive, long enough for her to get the medical help she desperately needed before she bled out.
Are any of the fingers completely amputated?
It looks like her entire hand is gone.
Okay, so if you can, just make sure they take a clean, dry cloth and wrap it around the wound and place pressure on it.
On the other side of the beach, Lyudmila was relaxing with her husband Vladimir in the sand. As it was coming to the end of their holiday, she was trying to make the most of the hot sun and warm waters before she had to go back to her cold hometown in Russia. She suggested to her husband that they should go swimming. He was deeply engrossed in his book, so declined, but encouraged her to go swimming by herself before they headed home. She agreed and disappeared into the water. At the same time, a dive instructor called Hassan Ali was on the sea floor with a client, showing her the basics of diving and introducing them to a new underwater world. Nearing the end of the dive, Hassan watched as a 3-meter whitetip shark approached him and his client. Concerned by its nervous movements, he decided to make himself look as large as possible, and they both attempted to kick away the animal as it circled them, seemingly looking for a safe route of attack. When it realized that it was getting nowhere with the divers, it suddenly shot up to the surface as it grasped another meal, Ludmila. Hassan watched in horror as the shark grabbed the elderly woman by the leg and pulled her beneath the surface. He was helpless to do anything but watch. The animal made quick work of her leg, tearing at it with a ferocity that Hassan had only seen on TV. Within seconds, it had torn her foot from her body. He struggled to see anything further as Ludmila's blood filled the ocean around her in a red cloud. Worrying for his client, he quickly brought her to the surface and handed her off to a colleague before diving back in to help the woman he had just witnessed being torn apart by a shark. He began to shout to everyone on the beach to get out of the water and that there was a shark attacking swimmers, but everyone already knew. They had already seen Olga getting attacked just 10 minutes earlier. As the lifeguards pulled Olga onto the jetty, they suddenly heard the screams of another woman, and upon looking towards the source, they could see an elderly woman covered in blood. They realized that the shark that had attacked Olga was not finished, and immediately began to evacuate the beach. With the help of Hassan, they were able to pull Ludmila from the water and lay her next to Olga as they attempted to slow the bleeding of both victims. Within a few minutes, they were picked up by ambulances and taken to the nearest hospital, but their ordeal was far from over. The paramedics struggled to keep both women alive as they fought to stop the extreme blood loss and shock from killing them both. Olga went into cardiac arrest during her transportation, but was miraculously resuscitated before she reached the hospital. In the operating room, the medical staff were finally able to see how severe Olga's injuries really were. The shark had removed most of her hand below the elbow, forcing surgeons to partially amputate what was left of her limb. Aside from her missing hand, she had a giant chunk taken out of her buttocks, so much so that a section of her spinal cord was visible. She was lucky not to lose her legs. She was given 6 units of blood to replace all that she lost in the water before being sent to intensive care for monitoring. Ludmila was also rushed into the operating room where she was assessed to see how they could save her life. Her left foot had to be amputated from where the shark had initially grabbed her, ripping her foot from her body. As she had tried to fight off the shark, it had grabbed her by her right arm, and out of instinct, she had pulled her arm from its mouth. This action tore her skin from her arm, leaving the bone fully exposed before the animal severed her hand entirely. Her wounds were cleaned and closed as best that they could, administering her with 2 units of blood. The women remained in hospital in Cairo for 2 months before being airlifted together to Sheremetyevo International Airport near Moscow until they were able to be released back home. Their recoveries were long and arduous, with Olga's wounds even becoming septic once she arrived back in Russia. But eventually both women were able to make a full recovery, their bodies covered in scars. The shark responsible for the attacks was photographed by the client diving with Hassan Ali and had a distinctive notch from its fin, leading to an investigation as officials tried to locate the aggressive shark. It was soon identified as the perpetrator of the next 3 attacks, the last one killing an elderly German tourist. The shark was never caught, but was spotted by diver operators a few months later. Shockingly, videos were taken of a dive master hand-feeding this shark, a practice that has now been banned. It is thought that the hand-feeding of sharks contributed to the attacks that week as they became less frightened of humans and thought of them as a source of food. This might explain why the shark had bitten both women on the arm, possibly expecting it to be holding food. The divers would carry the food in a pack above their buttocks, which gives an indication as to why Olga's buttocks might have been bitten that day. This story was one of the worst shark attack sprees in modern history and brought a fear of the ocean to the locals for years to come, fearing that if they entered the waters, they would be next to be attacked and possibly meet their terrifying final affliction. Lying on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula in Sharm el-Sheikh, a coastal paradise and a tourist hotspot in Egypt with an arid desert landscape, offers an oasis of lagoons, palm trees, and sandy beaches overlooking the expansive Red Sea. Beneath the waves of the sea is a wonderland of colorful corals and a home for vibrant and diverse marine life. But also lurking in the mysterious water are vicious sharks that attack without warning, as one German couple would come to find out. On December 5, 2010, 71-year-old Renate Seifert and her husband Rudolf were in the luxurious Hyatt Regency beachfront resort in Sharm el-Sheikh. Here, the vibrant hues of the sea and sky blended perfectly, creating a beautiful backdrop for a holiday of fun and relaxation. For the 12th time, the couple had flown from Germany and sought accommodation in this luxurious hotel, as it offered them tranquility that they were always craving. The resort was flooded with natural light and breathtaking views of the private beach that drew them back every single year. It was around noon, and the sun was blazing down from a clear blue sky, heating the soft, powdery sand that provided the perfect cushion on their every step as the couple stepped on the beach. Unbeknown to them, the beach had earlier been closed for a few days after several shark attacks were reported in the area on 4 consecutive days. Today was the second day it had been reopened, and so it was packed to the brim and was a bustling scene filled with life and activity. Although this part of the world is blessed with year-round sunshine, that day was particularly warmer than usual. Rudy, as Renate was fond of calling him, couldn't take the heat of the scorching sun any longer, and he decided to grab himself a cool, refreshing drink from one of the kiosks on the beach. Renate, on the other hand, preferred to dip herself in the inviting crystal-clear waters of the blue sea, as she uncovered the hidden treasures of the underwater world. She felt as if she was in a whole new world of wonder and mystery. She began exploring the wonders of the deep crystal waters and excitedly watched as the schools of brightly colored fish darted in and out of the crevices of the coral reefs. This went on for a while as she tried to understand the intricate relationship between the reefs, fish, and other sea creatures. Then, all of a sudden, all the fish seemed to have swum away all at once. Renate thought that they were just being playful, with no idea that she was in grave danger. Circling around her was a sleek, streamlined shark adorned with a white-tipped dorsal fin, the Oceanic white-tip shark. It was silently stalking her, with its large and circular eyes fixated on her, after having marked her as its prey. Whitetips are one of the most dangerous sharks, not just because of their sharp teeth or massive size, but because they have a particular set of skills that make them a nightmare for any prey that crosses their path. Firstly, whitetips are notorious for their hunting tactics. They are known for stalking their prey from below and using their keen senses to detect even the slightest movement in the water. Once they spot a potential meal, they will accelerate towards it at lightning speed, using their powerful tail to propel themselves forward. With jaws that can exert up to 500 pounds of force, their bite is nothing short of ferocious. But what makes whitetips even more dangerous is their persistence. Unlike other sharks, which may give up if their prey puts up a good fight, whitetips are relentless. They will continue to pursue their prey, even if it manages to escape their initial attack. This makes them a serious threat to any swimmer or diver who finds themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Another reason why whitetips are so dangerous is their adaptability. They are able to survive in a wide range of environments, from the shallowest reefs to the depths of the open ocean. This means that they are encountered by humans more frequently than other species of shark, which tend to stick to specific regions. With a sudden burst of energy, the shark accelerated As it got closer to her, it opened its mouth, exposing a set of formidable teeth, perfectly evolved for tearing flesh and crushing bones, and closed it on her leg. Renata immediately felt a sharp pain in her body as the shark's teeth sunk deeper into her flesh. She let out a screeching scream that brought the beachgoers to a standstill. All eyes were now on the water near the jetty she had used to access the deeper water. Her arms were waving wildly in the air as she called out for help. With her legs still between the shark's jaws, it began shaking her violently in the water before finally letting go. Just when she thought the shark was done, it came at her again, and again, and again. Amidst the thrashing, Renata was screaming in pain and flailing as she tried to stay afloat. It was evident to everyone watching in horror that she was struggling for her life. People were watching from all directions with their mouths wide open, but they would not dare go to help her, as the multiple attacks on her made it seem like there was more than one shark in the water. Chaos erupted as people started flooding the shoreline, while those swimming in it raced to get out. The once peaceful seascape was now a scene of pure mayhem. Then there was a sudden silence as the water churning around Renata turned red. Within moments, Renata seized all movement as she lay there silently floating in the water. A current slowly swept her toward the shore, where the lifeguards retrieved her and brought her to the beach. She was missing flesh in her buttocks. She had deep bite marks on her abdomen. Her right arm below the elbow was severed, and her right leg below her knee was also missing. Sadly, the lifeguards' efforts to resuscitate her failed. Within seconds, a crowd had formed around the lifeguards, and news of the shark attack had spread through every corner of the resort. When her description landed in Rudolph's ears, he felt as if the world around him was spinning. He dropped the drink he had been enjoying, and suddenly its taste in his mouth was bitter. He rushed toward the forming crowd and pushed his way toward Renata's lifeless body. He held his head in shock as he couldn't believe his eyes. In just a matter of minutes, his lifelong companion was gone. News of the other shark attacks that had occurred in the same area before Renata was being spread around the beach, which stirred anger among the tourists. Prior to coming to the beach, they had not been notified by the staff about the possibility of shark attacks and had continued to immerse themselves in the water, oblivious of the impending danger. However, the hotel staff defended themselves, saying that they saw no need to inform their guests, as the authorities had determined that the sharks were no longer a threat. Their explanations fell on the deaf ears of the angry tourists, as they argued that the hotel management had put their money ahead of their safety. Rudolph's trip had come to an unexpected end, and he now had to make arrangements of taking his wife's body back home to America with him for a proper burial. The culprit was never caught, but experts believed it to be a 3-meter-long oceanic whitetip shark. The severity of the attack and the large amount of tissue removed from her body in several places indicated the abnormal shark behavior which is unique to oceanic whitetip sharks. Eventually, after investigations into the sudden spike of shark attacks along the resort, it was suspected that the warmer than usual temperature of the water may have lured the shark to the northern reaches of the sea. In addition, a ship carrying animals from Australia had been spotted by numerous tourists, tossing the carcasses of dead animals into the sea as it cruised past the shore. Many people believe the crew on board the ship had unknowingly attracted one of the deadliest species of shark to the beaches, causing numerous people on vacation to meet their horrifying final affliction. It was May 17, 1893. The streets of Havana were alive with the sound of music and laughter as the city prepared to celebrate the young king of Spain, Alfonso III's birthday. The grand festivities were marked by a sense of excitement and passion as the city was adorned with colorful decorations. A range of celebratory events was planned months ahead. The day began with a parade led by the Spanish governor, who rode through the streets atop a majestic white stallion. It was followed by a procession of Spanish troops carrying flags and banners of Spain and dressed in their finest regalia. The vast crowds that had gathered and lined the streets cheered and applauded the march. Eventually, the parade moved into the central square. Local musicians and dancers took the stage to perform traditional Cuban dances. The great ceremony's opening was announced by the sounds of distant church bells ringing as the sounds of salsa and rumba ran in the background. The governor raised the royal banner, officially marking the start of the celebration. The residents of Havana participated in a great feast of paella, roast pork, and other delicacies, all of which were accompanied by large amounts of wine and spirits. The people danced and partied into the later afternoon hours. The air was filled with heavy sounds of laughter, music, and chatter from the people. Later, the bullfight, a traditional Spanish spectacle, was a key part of the celebration. It took place in a dusty bull ring, surrounded by colorful banners and flags. The matadors, dressed in their traditional finery, showcased their skill and bravery as they faced off against powerful bulls. The event attracted a crowd of excited spectators, eager to see the stunt. As each bull was defeated, the crowd erupted into a frenzy of cheers and applause, celebrating the country's unique traditions and cultural heritage. After the spectacle that was the bullfight, people were excited about another daring event. The streets of Havana were still alive with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers when the clock hit 4 p.m. Ramon Margulies, a renowned Spanish daredevil, had traveled a long way to be part of the festivities. He had a reputation for pulling off some of the most daring stunts the world had ever seen, and he was determined to make this celebration one that would be talked about for years to come. However, the event became memorable in ways nobody could have imagined. A large crowd had gathered in one of the city's minor plazas, eager to witness the spectacle that was about to unfold. A hot air balloon stood tall in the center of the square, swaying gently in the breeze. The anticipation was palpable, and there was a sense of excitement and nervousness in the air. Ramon donned his traditional gymnast attire and stood near the balloon, looking up at it with a sense of reverence. He had been practicing this stunt for months, and now it was time to show the world what he was capable of. Unbeknownst to the people, this was the first time Ramon was going to perform this stunt. His wife, Ana, was hesitant to let her husband commit to this dangerous act for the first time. However, Ramon was determined, as he had planned the safety precautions carefully, rehearsing the stunt countless times. As the band played, Ramon climbed into the basket of the hot air balloon, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The balloon slowly lifted off the ground, and Ramon waved to the crowd with a smile on his face. But this was just the beginning. As the balloon rose higher and higher into the sky, Ramon climbed out of the basket and onto the trapeze bar that had been rigged below the balloon's basket. The crowd gasped as they watched Ramon perform a series of daring acrobatics high above their heads. He held the trapeze bar with one hand, then hung onto it with both feet, letting his head and arms dangle upside down as the balloon continued its ascension. Ramon's plan was to make a sharp ascension, pull the escape valve, and descend within the city or on its outskirts safely. Not only was this incredibly dangerous because of the risk of falling, but Ramon knew he couldn't land on the waters of the nearby harbor in Havana. After all, it was infested with oceanic whitetip sharks known for devouring shipwreck survivors, brutally tearing them to shreds and leaving nothing but whirlpools of blood in the water. As Ramon ascended half a mile into the air, something unexpected happened. The wind picked up, and the balloon began to sway wildly in the sky. Ramon struggled to maintain his balance. Still, he continued to perform his stunts, determined to finish the routine. Meanwhile, a businessman named John was attending a party on a boat. He watched in awe as a man flew through the air in a hot air balloon in the distance. At first, he thought it was just a simple pleasure ride, but as the balloon grew closer, he could see that something extraordinary was happening. There was a man flying through the air, suspended from a trapeze bar attached underneath the balloon's basket. However, as he watched in amazement, the sudden gust of wind took this man toward the direction of the harbor. The balloon started to float away from the city center and into the bay as the wind picked up. John could see Ramon returning to the basket to pull the escape valve. Consequently, the hot air balloon began to descend. However, it was too late, as the upper air currents had carried the balloon over the waters of the bay. According to some locals, a few weeks before the city's celebration of the young king's birthday, a local man decided to swim in the bay completely drunk. While he was a capable swimmer, he splashed around the waters too much and unwittingly attracted the attention of a pack of Oceanic whitetip sharks. Concerned onlookers warned the man, but he couldn't escape the water in time and was eventually torn to pieces. From then, the same pack of sharks took shelter in the area. This meant that the sharks had gained a taste for human blood and were now waiting for more. When Ramon returned to the crowd's view, he was back inside the safety of the basket. However, the balloon was rapidly descending toward the water, and Ramon knew he had to do something. John told the engineer on the boat to ready the ship toward the spot where Ramon could possibly land. However, the balloon descended way too rapidly, not giving John enough time to cover the distance. He was 200 yards away from where Ramon was landing. Arriving a few feet above the water, Ramon knew he had to remove himself from the balloon as he might get tangled with the lines. With a sickening thud, the almost deflated balloon hit the surface and began to sink. Being an experienced swimmer, Ramon quickly jumped out and dove headfirst into the water. He quickly bobbed his head out, gasping for a quick breath, when suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his leg. He looked down and saw a cloud of blood in the water and the unmistakable shape of a shark swimming toward him. He tried to defend himself with his hands. Unfortunately, it was a pack of Oceanic whitetip, all wanting another taste of human flesh. They immediately began picking him apart, limb from limb. There were at least a dozen of these fearsome predators encircling Ramon at the time. The water erupted into chaos as the sharks took turns in tearing apart Ramon's limbs. The defenseless aeronaut screamed in terror. However, his screams could not be heard. The sharks had already dragged him beneath the surface. Eventually, John arrived at the spot where Ramon was being attacked. However, all that was left were whirlpools of blood in the water. Pieces of Ramon's leg and some of his fingers floated on the surface in plain view. John knew that the shark had torn him to pieces. Unfortunately, the events unfolded too quickly to reveal what really happened. However, from the statements of onlookers on that day, the sharks tore Ramon to pieces, bringing the Daredevil to his terrifying final affliction.